Hey up everybody, and welcome back to the I'll Do Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the classic squad game. This is the game which has been a very long-standing tradition in Velogames and arguably one of the harder ones to master, and it certainly takes a little bit of tinkering or some pre-planning to what you're going to be doing, not just in the one upcoming race, but in the other races. So this is going to be a little bit more of a, rather than a traditional I'll Do Cycling video where I go through a rider list, this is going to be more of an explanation of how I would approach this set of, how many races is it? 12 races from Milano Sanremo to Liege, Bastogne, Liege. Obviously this is a little quick glimpse as to what my team is, but the basic premise of the game is that there are 12 races and you have 24 credits, and as per usual you have 100 credits to use throughout for each race. Now obviously the riders are priced based on how well they are expected to be going in general, but the races are split into two categories that you'll see in the scoring system here. So you have Category 1 races and you have Category 2 races, unlike the Super Classico 6s where you will see a Category 1, a Category 2 and a Category 3 races. This one just has the two categories. The Category 1s are the air quote monuments, and the other races are all the Category 2 races. So they're other World Tour level events, but they're just not monuments. So looking at the scoring system, what you can obviously see here is that the Category 1 races far outscore the Category 2 races, especially when you look at, say, the top 3 positions, for example, like first in a Category 1 race. Okay, no, it's not double, but it's a significantly larger amount of points than you get for winning a Category 2 race. And as a matter of fact, for winning a Category 2 race, you get 260 points, and the equivalent of that in a Category 1 race would be getting 4th place. So therefore, targeting the Category 1 races very strongly with as many transfers as you can is likely to be a better strategy, just because it nets you more points, and especially focusing on those top few positions. The further down you get, the smaller the gap becomes between the points. Like, it starts off at 160 point gap here at the top, then 130, 100, 80, etc, etc. So you get sort of depreciating odds as you go down. So for example, somebody finishing 15th in a Category 1 race is only 20 points better than a Category 2. So at that point it's not really that worthwhile focusing too much on the Category 1 races for the kind of people who are going to be finishing in the more minor positions, as you might do in a Super Classico, for example. This way round, it's probably better just to focus as best you can on using your transfers to get those top riders in there. Obviously, speaking of which, let's go take a look at some of the riders before I talk about generally the kind of strategy. So the list at the moment, the filter is for Milano Sanremo, because that is the first race. You can also click this button here which says click here to show the full rider list, and this will include all riders available across all of the races pretty much every single rider of every World Tour team and every Pro Continental team. George has very helpfully separated them into teams as well, which is really helpful for navigating around. I'm not going to go through every single one of these riders, do not worry. This would take borderline an hour to do, but we will take a look at some of the top few. Obviously Pogacar being 22 credits may seem relatively cheap, but this is you need to select 12 riders rather than, say, in a stage race you're picking 9, in the Super Classico you're picking 6. So Pogacar being 22 credits takes up a fifth of your team's budget, when he proportionally is less than a tenth of your riders. So proportionally he takes up a lot of credits. You want to really be looking at riders who, obviously for Sanremo, who are going to be doing well there. Just for the ease of that, I'm just going to click back on the ones which are just in Sanremo. So, Tadej, Van der Poel, obviously with the likes of last year, Philipsen, Pedersen, Ganna, Milan, for example, maybe even somebody like Olav Koy could be worthwhile considering. Magnier is not in there. The point being, it's not just thinking about what Sanremo is going to be bringing, it's thinking about the subsequent races as well. Because you have Sanremo here, but then say Bruges de Pin is next, which is a Category 2 race. But Pogacar's not doing that race, neither is Mathieu van der Poel. So then you're going to need to transfer those two out and put in some sprinters probably if you want to keep scoring some decent points. But then they are doing E3, and then they're doing Gent-Wevelgem, but then they're missing Dwars door Vlaanderen, they're doing Ronde van Vlaanderen, and then they kind of disappear a bit, and then Poggi comes back again towards the end for Amstel, Flèche Wallonne, and Liège, Bastogne, Liège. Keeping Pogacar in the whole time may seem like a good idea, but it's probably not, because you want to keep chopping and changing your team. But pretty much you want to save a decent bulk of transfers. I'd say at least 10, ideally. Maybe a little bit less, maybe like 8. For the Ardennes. For the switch from Roubaix to Brabant-Sipel, you go through a massive switch from going for very cobbled, focused riders into Ardennes focused riders. So your Pogacars, your Pidcocks, etc., will all be very good choices later on. So with that in mind, it's hard to say exactly how many transfers you want to save for when we hit that switch to Brabant-Sipel. But I'd say something about 8 could work. It depends sort of what your team composition is, because if you're probably going to want to be putting Pogacar in, because if he's doing the last 3 races, then you can just put him in and forget about it, and you're in theory saving credits by saving transfers. By doing that. You've also got Pidcock. He'd also be a good one to have in there. Van Hills, Hershey, Gregoire, Healy, Stevie Williams, etc., etc. So you're going to want to save a handful of transfers for those last 3 races. But I think I have made the error in years gone by with this competition of really being too stingent with my transfers early on, which has limited my point scoring in some of the cobble races because I'm so focused on the Ardennes. Whereas I think that if you just put in Pogacar and some of the other big favourites, then they'll be just fine for those last few races. But what you want to be looking at, I would say for example, I think looking at the next couple of races, I think that Philipsen and Milan especially for Sanremo are very good choices because they could do very well there. And they have the additional benefit of then doing Bruges de Pin, which is the next race, so you don't need to take them out for that one. So for example, this would be my team for Sanremo, but then when it comes to Bruges de Pin, I would probably be swapping out Pogacar and I would put in Tim Merlier, because I've got Philipsen, I get Merlier, I've got Milan, so that's probably 3 of the fastest sprinters in that race. And if I'm feeling really keen, what I might do is substitute one of these 4 credit riders up to Olav Koy, for example, to get those, to get another big sprinter in there. But like I mentioned earlier, because the Category 2 races don't provide you as many points, maybe that could be a waste of a transfer. I might want to change some people back for E3, which would be the next race. So, and because then Poggi and Van der Poel would be there, but then the race after that is Gent-Wevelgem, where once again, a Phillips and a Milan and a Koy might be quite useful, because that can sometimes end in a bit more of a sprint. So it's a real complicated and intricate one to be thinking about. Now, what's also important to note, I think probably one of the final things I want to note is, obviously you might be looking and saying, like, what are all these 4 credit riders? Some of them aren't even taking place. They're taking part in Sanremo. So what I've done here is selected riders, again, by clicking on the Show Full Rider List. I have gone through and selected Alpecin de Koenig and UAE Team Emirates riders based upon their predicted races that they're going to be doing. You can also look at kind of historical results and stuff like that. So, for example, Alpecin are really good because they will have point scoring opportunities, assist points. Let's just clarify that. These guys are here pretty much solely for assist points. From Van der Poel and Philipsen for the Alpecin guys, and then obviously Pogacar for the UAE Team Emirates riders. And the beauty of Pogacar is that because he's doing such an intense one-day race programme with the Cobble Classics and the Ardennes, stacking up on UAE Team Emirates riders who, okay, no, they're not going to be in Sanremo or maybe even the next few races, but in the long run, it's going to be better to just literally put these guys in and forget about them and just let the assist points accumulate as the races go by. That way, all you have to do is focus on the transfers you're going to be using in, say, between 5 riders at the top. That way, it just simplifies things a lot more, and these guys will just accumulate some more points. Yes, it might be more efficient to think about specific riders who might go in breakaways, but generally, I find that going with this is a far safer strategy and far easier to do. And not a lot of people do this. A lot of people kind of miss out on that, but the top point scorers generally do this. I will kind of round it up here. I think that's some pretty good advice. This is what my team is looking like at the moment, just because I'm putting Philipsen in and Milan, because I know that they'll also be in Bruges de Pau. And then, like I said, I'll probably put Merlier in just to get those 3 top sprinters. That way I'm only really using 1 transfer. And then I'll get to E3, and then I'll swap him back probably for Pogacar, because then I get Pogacar and Pedersen in there. For example, I might do something like that. So I've got Philipsen, Pogacar, Pedersen, Milan as my main guys for Milano Sanremo. I think that's a pretty strong quartet going into it. I could go with Van der Poel as well. That's certainly, something to consider. That would enable me to get a slightly high. I could get an 8 credit rider in here instead, or a 6 credit rider instead of the 4 credits. But that's generally what I'm thinking of doing, is relying very heavily on Van der Poel and Pogacar. They'll be in your team the majority of the time, apart from those few instances where you'll be wanting to put some sprinters in place of them. Most notably for Bruges de Pau, maybe Gent Wevelgem. That's still a little bit of a question mark. And the Scheldeples as well. Those would probably be the 3 where you might take Pogacar / Van der Poel out for 1 race, use that 1 transfer, put a sprinter in, and then the race after, put Pogacar and Van der Poel right back in. Because, like we said with the scoring system, it's so important in these high caliber races to get those, especially the riders who are going to be in the top 5, because it's a disproportionate amount of points, and Pogacar and Van der Poel are likely to do that. So I will be doing more detailed analysis of specific riders to select for each race alongside the Super Classico videos, so long as I have time to do so and it's not too overbearing. That is my hopes. But let me know what you're thinking in the comment sections. If you have done well in this competition in the past, what sort of tips would you give to everybody to kind of help us all out? I'm looking forward to getting involved with it once again alongside the Super Classico. But all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut.